Welcome to the Voice of Retail for the week of September 9th, 2019. I'm your host, Michael LeBlanc. This podcast is brought to you in conjunction with Retail Council of Canada. In this week's episode, I get up close and personal with the one and only Sonny Brar, a veteran retailer who is now Vice President of Member Relations and Education at Retail Council of Canada. We focus our conversation on retail loss prevention, top trends, what Sonny is hearing around the table at the Loss Prevention Advisory Council, and what is on deck for Retail Secure, Canada's premier retail LP conference, coming up in a couple of weeks in Toronto. Next, I chat with Sean Copeland, Vice President of Data at Lift & Co. in Toronto. We delve into their new cannabis study as 2.0 opportunities emerge. Can you still compete with 1.0 strategies? Canadian Cannabis Consumer Insights for Legalization 2.0. And we tease out lessons learned for recreational cannabis retailers. Lastly, I'll take a look at the retail news of the week, but first, let's listen into my interview with Sonny Brar. Sonny, welcome back to the Voice of Retail. Not your first time on the Voice of Retail podcast, so welcome back. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, and thank you for having me on your podcast for the second time, Michael.
So for those listeners who maybe are less familiar, why don't we spend a minute or two, just tell us about a bit about yourself before we kind of get into it. Veteran retailer, but tell us a little bit about your professional journey and probably what you do here today at Retail Council of Canada.
Yeah, sure. I like that professional journey. Yeah, so I've been in retail my whole career. So my quick history with retail and my career, I've been privileged to work with IKEA. That's where I started off. So in the risk management and compliance space, then moved on to Sobeys, also in the same area with risk management, health, safety, and HR and compliance. Then left retail and went to manufacturing and grocery and had the privilege to work with Maple Leaf Foods, with obviously Mr. Michael McCain, and in compliance, and then moved on to Toys R Us. And then for the last 6 years, I was with Toys R Us as their national country health and safety and compliance manager. So you can tell I've been in retail predominantly for majority of my career, and now almost 3 years at RCC. So to answer your question, here I'm the Vice President of Member Relations and Education, and I do oversee membership, education, LP, HR, and health and safety.
So as you tend to do in these not-for-profit organizations, you wear a lot of hats.
Yes.
You bring great depth of experience.
Thank you.
Today we're going to talk about specifically one of those hats, which is loss prevention, retail secure. Our Retail Council of Canada's Retail Secure Conference is coming up at the end of this month on the 24th, but we'll get to that a bit later. What I wanted to start out with is one of the things you chair is a council, Loss Prevention Council, Advisory Council, where we bring retailers of all formats, coast to coast together, like-minded professionals, and we get them together and we just talk about what is top of their minds.
Right.
So give us a sense of what you're hearing at that table. What are the key issues for loss prevention professionals in Canada? And
great question. So yes, very privileged to be the chair of the Loss Prevention Advisory Council. As you mentioned, like-minded professionals, and where we basically discuss the synergies that we experience when it comes to the loss prevention space. You know, I can give you 10, which I'll get into with the agenda, but first and foremost, organized crimes. Many retailers are sharing their experiences with how intelligent criminals are getting out there in the retail space. To give you an example, just observing shifts. When do they have more staff on board versus having less staff? So they're obviously assessing the risk, also targeting certain locations. So that is definitely top of mind. With those organized crimes, unfortunately, also comes violence in the workplace. A lot of our members are communicating with RCC that they are really concerned on how violence has increased.
I was going to say that organized crime has always been a facet to a greater or lesser degree of loss prevention.
Right.
Techniques, old school, new school have changed, but it does feel like there's been an increase of the intersection of violence and organized crime. Is that what I'm hearing?
Absolutely. And it goes so you're absolutely correct, but it goes twofold, right? One is a lot of thieves, criminals, they know the internal policies in retail. So we'll speak into retail here to be specific. And all retailers, most retailers, if not all, I couldn't see any retailer not training this, train their workers. Obviously, safety is top of mind. Take care of yourself. You don't go after the shoplifter. You don't go running after them. You don't go after their car. Your safety is priority. Products can be replaced. People and lives can't. So when a criminal or a thief goes into a retail establishment with that mindset, they know that if they escalate or heighten their voice or give an aggressive behavior, that the employee and staff is trained to resent that and to walk away. So if they're going in with that mindset, basically it's a grab and go. I know I can steal. If I get stopped, I'm going to get aggressive. Therefore, the employees, as they're trained to do, are going to step back, and I can get out of the store freely or without having any consequences. So the intelligence is there. You made the comment earlier about old school. Listen, convex mirrors, security tags, P tags as they're known in the LP space, security guards, floor walkers, all are still relevant. I wouldn't want to be on your podcast and mislead your members or your listeners to say that the old school methods don't work, but the public is getting intelligent now. And so although you have those old school practices, now technology is coming into place.
They're augmented, enhanced, and as you said, you may have in the short term a perpetrator that raises their voice and is more aggressive, or a group of, but they're on camera. Right. So the short term is, okay, you made it out of the location. But the longer term is more complicated.
It is, and it's a great point. And listen, with CCTV, closed caption television recording, most employers, you will not hear what is being said unless they have audio live camera recording systems. But you got to keep in mind, Michael, with that comment, the comment that I made earlier about them being sophisticated and actually looking at retail establishments, they'll be able to pick out your blind spots, right? So it is sometimes difficult for a retailer to capture every single floor area space in their retail store. And don't forget about ex-employees. Right. If you work for an establishment, you know your cameras, you know where the blind spots are. Therefore, you can educate a possible thief or perpetrator on where to have those situations take place. So if I do go, it's not on camera, but
from a trend perspective, number one that comes to your mind that you're hearing is more organized crime with more violence or aggression. So what would you say would be number two or number?
So organized crime number one, violence in the workplace number two.
Close coupling, actually, right?
There's synergies there. Absolutely. Yeah. Although there is a synergy with violence in the workplace, the aggressive behavior I am going to separate. And the reason for that is there is an escalation that retailers are hearing when it comes to aggressive behavior. So let me give you an example. Most retailers require a receipt with a return.
Sure.
And with the retailers that we're talking to, if a customer does not have a receipt, most of the times the employee at the returns counter will say, listen, this is our policy. They're obviously trying to work with the customer. Exactly. But hey, I want cash, Michael. The customers, I don't care if I don't have my receipt. I shop here all the time. And then it gets escalated, that heightened verbal interaction with the employee, right? So it's easy for you to hear violence and think aggressive is part of that, but it isn't, because there is violence with physical, verbal, etc., but aggressive behavior. So that no, you cannot do that to me. Let me talk to your supervisor. I've been a customer.
More of that now than 100%. Ever before. Right?
And the reason for that, Mike, one of the reasons what we're hearing from the retailers, and you kind of touched on it earlier, is they're getting intelligent. Right? This is all about intelligence. They're getting smarter. I know if I go to the receipt counter and cause enough of noise,
make a bit of a ruckus,
obviously from store perception, you have customers there. Is it in my best interest to just give them this $10, $20, $30 item and avoid? And never keep it, and also keep in mind, social media, phones come out, people start taking pictures of that interaction, the last thing that you want. So that's number 3. And number 4 is shrink. And what I mean by shrink is retailers definitely want to know, and I'll touch on this in a little bit, where do they compare with other retailers when it comes to shrink? Now, for the people and the listeners on the call, Shrink is a common term. It's actually a shortened term for shrinkage in the retail space, commonly known as shrink. So it's basically a term to describe a reduction in inventory due to things like shoplifting, fraud, employee theft, administrative errors.
Because there's really two components of shrink. One is just I've lost track of the inventory, it's gone somewhere else. So kind of administrative shrink. And then there's shrink, which is related to loss prevention. So what you're saying is, and this is very common, is I know what my shrink numbers are.
But I want to know
is that good? Am I on trend? Am I worse? And so, what are we doing to help?
So great question and great segue. So, Retail Council of Canada, obviously being the voice of retail, we listened to our LP community. The advisory council, the Loss Prevention Advisory Council that you spoke about earlier, and working with them, we actually launched a loss prevention shrink survey. Now it's called the Loss Prevention and Shrink Survey. The survey isn't just on shrink; it is hyper focused on shrink, but there are other questions that we ask in there. So it actually was just launched not too long ago.
Launched to the members to complete.
Correct.
We haven't put it. Has it been put?
Sure. You know what? Let me expand on that, and you're right. I should expand on that. So a survey link was sent to all of our Retail Council of Canada members to complete. We've given them 2 weeks to complete it. At which point we will compile the stats, and we will be completing a full report on these stats, known as the 2019 Loss Prevention and Shrink Survey results. But at our upcoming Secure Conference, which is hard to believe is actually 2 weeks from today.
Well, great segue. Yeah. So let's talk about the conference.
Okay.
So at the end of the day, at the conference, you're going to present some great results.
Yes.
And so for anyone listening to the podcast today, if you're a member and you want to participate and haven't seen the link, I'll put it in the show notes. But shortly that will be completed. I mean, your deadline's coming up. But more interestingly, let's talk about when that's going to be presented upcoming the annual Retail Secure Conference, which, as you said, is coming right around the corner.
I know. You know what? So, a great point. Thank you for that, Michael. So, September 24th at the International Center, we have a full day Retail Secure here in Toronto. So, if you haven't registered, make sure you do. And if you have any questions, you feel free to contact Michael or myself. But it's a packed agenda. And, for all the listeners, regardless if you're in the loss prevention space or not, I can guarantee that you will walk away with a wealth of knowledge in this conference. So first and foremost, as I was speaking to earlier, the Shrink Survey, we will be presenting some high-level stats from the Shrink and LP survey. So really looking forward to that.
Yeah, available once it's released, available to all members.
Correct.
In its fullness, you'll just be kind of hitting the high notes.
Exactly. So it's like kind of a teaser as they say, hey, here's what you can expect from the survey, but then the full survey itself with the stats and the summaries and et cetera will be fully completed in a little bit. Our goal is to get it launched sooner than later, but definitely hopefully in October. But we will be giving high-level stats in a couple of weeks.
Great.
So away from the Shrink, though, just the amazing people that we have, just speaking. And that was really important to us. So first and foremost, I'm not going in any particular order, but we're very glad to be joined by Rachel Awe, who's the AVP in in-store technology for Canadian Tire. And she's really going to do a deep dive in stopping shoplifters who go high tech. So remember how I spoke about that a little bit earlier, about that intelligence and et cetera, and how people are really looking at retail establishments and their payroll schedules and blind spots and all that. Rachel's actually going to go and do a deep dive on what methods Canadian Tire uses. And Canadian Tire is obviously a large big box retailer, and it will definitely resonate with the crowd to see what Canadian Tire has done to minimize these controls and these risks. And listen, Michael, to be fully transparent, you can be a big box store in retail, automotive, clothing, apparel, whatever segment that you're in, food, grocery. There are synergies.
Yeah, you're going to learn something, right?
You're going to learn something. Going on, we also have great speakers from the police, which is really important to RCC. The LP Advisory Council that we're speaking about earlier, we partnered up with RCMP, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, last year, and we work very closely with what's known as the CAFC, the Canadian Anti-Fraud Center. And the RCMP is actually going to get up and speak about gift card scams. It's a trend, Michael, that retailers are seeing. And unfortunately, most of the times the retailer will take the hit. And I don't want to take too much away from Keith. Keith is the gentleman from RCMP, Keith Ward, who will be speaking to it. So I've had the pleasure, he's been on many of our calls, and I've had the pleasure to hear him many times. So I don't want to take too much away from his thunder, but he will be giving a lot of tips when it comes to gift card scams. Moving down the road, again, in no particular order, our region of Peel, again, really talking about what the region of Peel police has seen when it comes to organized retail crime. First thing one of the first questions you asked me, Sonny, what's the highest priority issues that LP space is hearing? And we talked about organized crime. So Constable Barreau, who has been on many of our calls, will be actually explaining from a police perspective on what they are seeing with the organized crime and how to control and be aware that if your retail establishment is being attacked.
Sonny, one of the ones I'm looking forward to, and I've been asked to and thrilled to moderate a session or do an interview kind of as the voice of retail with a couple of professionals from Hudson's Bay Company, Tony Cacciapoli and Patrick McAvoy, who are coming in and joining us. And it's really great because I've already had the chance to talk to both of them, and you've got Tony's got vast experience and brings great perspective. Still operating in the current environment, and Patrick, a bit newer senior director, but also is bringing on the new technologies. Now, it also gets back to the beginning of our conversation, where the kind of whatever old school things still are very important, but now they're being layered on with some very new technology. So that should be that I know is going to be a great session based on these the caliber of my two guests.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And listen, we're very grateful to have you on there also moderating it. But you touched on it, the technology, right? So for all the listeners today on the podcast, when we say technology, we're talking about AI, we're talking about facial recognition, and again, I don't want to take in artificial intelligence, and AR, augmented reality, and facial recognition,
sounds
like
it's motion detection, flow detection.
Exactly, new alarm systems in place, P tags, hidden P tags. It's definitely like we're in 2020, and it's I'm genuinely looking forward to your session to really hear what HBC is doing in that space. So that's great. And just to tie it off, Michael, and again, there's much, much more. Michael and I are just going over some high-level items, is cybersecurity. And, there is a perception that some people, when they hear loss prevention, they don't think of cybersecurity, but there are many synergies with that. So we have some great speakers. We have people from Canadian Cyber Threat Exchange, again from Canadian Tire, BlackBerry, also Deloitte, who are really going to do a deep dive on cybersecurity and what to look for and where your vulnerabilities where your risks might be when it comes to what you have currently in your workplace. So listen, from everything that I've said, and I didn't even go through the full agenda.
Yeah, Tony Hunt wrapping it up. From
London Drugs, another great
chaos
point.
With leadership.
Active shooder training, another one.
It's a packed agenda. So suffice to say, I'll put it in the show notes. But a great event filled with professionals. You'll be keeping us all on time, and focus, and adding your perspective as the MC for the day. So listen. Thanks again for spending time with the Voice of Retail.
Thank you for having me.
Looking forward to keeping in touch. And you know what? When the formal or full survey is released, the Shrink survey, we'll get you back on, and you can hit the high notes for us sometime later in October or later in the fall. We'll get you back on, and we can talk a little bit more about that.
Thank you. Well, thank you for having me, and it was a pleasure.
Sean, welcome to the Voice of Retail. How are you doing today?
Really good. How are you?
Well, I'm thrilled to be sitting here and looking at your latest study, and found it very interesting. It's always great content for retailers and those in the industry. So I wanted to chit and chat about it, get a bit more information on the study, key observations, what we learned, and what retailers can take away from the study. But let's start, first of all, with a little bit about yourself, your role, and a little bit about Lift & Co. for my listeners who may not be as familiar.
Yeah, that sounds great. So I started in the market research space. I've worked for a handful of different research agencies across Canada. I'm sure you're familiar with a bunch of them. And then I moved moreover into loyalty and rewards when I worked at Loyalty One, the Air Miles company. And more recently started getting into sort of what people are considering data science when I joined a small media company that focuses on students and new parents. So it was a bit of a jump just over 4.5 months ago when I joined Lift & Co. And just jumped in deep into the cannabis industry.
Fantastic. It's, in one way, it's a bit of a change. At the center of it's still the consumer.
Absolutely.
So from one way, whether it's loyalty, consumer, or whatever, you're still in the same kind of ballpark, right?
Absolutely.
So tell me a bit about Lift & Co. for those who, again, may not be familiar with your organization. What do you do? What's your role? How do you work? And why are you interested in producing studies such as this?
For sure. So we really focus on helping the consumer navigate the cannabis industry. We help through receipts, reviews, as well as recommendations on our website. And all of this information that we provide back to the consumer is actually collected directly from the consumer as well. So this information that we're sharing with consumers, we can actually aggregate and share back with retailers as well as licensed producers and anyone else who's trying to learn more about the consumer in the industry.
And the reason you can do that is because you're not a retailer. So you provide a forum where you're not retailing cannabis, because that would not be allowed if you were a cannabis retailer to allow ratings and reviews, but it's a very popular thing. So you fill that gap, basically, right?
Absolutely. So we fill the gap between the consumer, the retailer, and the licensed producer.
All right, well, let's talk about the study you've just released in cooperation with EY. Talk about the study and give us a sense of how it was done and what you learned, and let's talk about it for a bit.
Sure. So this study we decided to undertake because there's such a lack of data in the Canadian space, specifically around cannabis. A lot of the data that we reference is from the US, where there are some markets that are a little bit more mature, like California.
Sure.
So we noticed that gap there, and with the upcoming changes to our cannabis regulations in October, we're going to start to see edibles, topicals enter the market probably as soon as December.
Yeah, but 60 days, right? Give or take after legalization. Yeah. It's a big change, right? I mean, it's a planned change, right? It was a year of recreational legalization and then into edibles. Many people have been looking forward to edibles for a whole bunch of reasons. What did you and how did you who did you talk to in your study to get the data?
So this study, we really went out wide and we reached out to the cannabis consumers as well as the canna-curious non-consumers. And we were able to also speak with bud tenders, so those retail store associates.
Right. So you got from the consumer, the non-consumer. I guess they exist on a spectrum of never going to do it all the way to curious. It's interesting. Edibles. I was at a recent event, and they were talking about how they thought edibles was another big step forward in legitimacy in the cannabis market, because it gets away from smoking and other different ways. Is those the kind of things that you learned from the study?
So this study, I mean, we really focused on what people were buying, what they're not buying, but also what kinds of products they're looking to buy in the future. So when edibles come to market, who is going to buy these products? One of the bigger findings, actually, and a little bit surprising to us, is this group of non-consumers who said, I wouldn't buy dried flower, but I think I would actually try some edibles. And this group was a lot bigger than we thought it would be. So when we look at the group who would consume edibles, as well as topicals, as well as extracts, that group actually totaled about 3 million new Canadian consumers.
Wow, so already not in the pool of consumers today, so to speak, whether it's in the legacy market or the legal market. They're not in the pool. Maybe they were at one point, right?
Yeah, these are people who have little to no knowledge of cannabis. Some of them have a little bit more than others when it comes to things like THC and CBD, but they're coming into the market pretty cold.
And what do you think it is about edibles? Is it they don't want to smoke the product, and that's really holding them back? Is that what you think?
Yeah, there's definitely a point of view around cannabis, and a lot of people have a perspective that it's something that has to be smoked. And with a lot of consumers, they don't want to smoke anything. And so the idea that they can actually consume cannabis without smoking it is something that's more appealing to them.
There's a lot to learn, though. I mean, the federal government decided, I think wisely, to delay the launch of edibles, because I think lessons learned from whether it's California, Colorado, any of the states in the U.S. is that the edible product just reacts differently. It's consumed differently. That gave rise to all the various things. It feels like a kind of a walk-run approach has been taken, and it seems to be connecting to consumers. Do you think?
I think so. I mean, there are definitely challenges with any rollout. I mean, we haven't seen this kind of rollout since, I don't know, Prohibition. Sure,
the end of Prohibition, if that, right?
Right. So I would say, while there are some challenges, consumers, you can just look outside on a Friday night and they're lined up outside every retail cannabis store that you can see. So it's definitely something that's resonating with consumers. Actually, one of the interesting facts that we found was that about 70% of consumers, when they entered the retail store, didn't actually know what they were about to buy. So unlike a grocery retail store where you're going in thinking, I'm going to pick up milk today.
You might be swayed one way or the other, but you pretty much have a perspective when you get there, right?
You at least know one or two things you're going to pick up. In this case, consumers were walking in saying, I'm going to buy cannabis. I don't know what kind. I don't know what brand.
Don't even understand the brands because some of them are so new and so forth and so on.
They might know, I want it to help me sleep, or I want to feel really good tonight at a party, but they don't know what they're looking for. And so this retail environment, the bud tender or the retail store associate becomes such a critical point in that consumer purchase journey.
We've seen that. I know many retailers I've talked to were surprised, or I guess it was validated by the amount that was bought online. And the thinking initially was that it would be more, and it may turn out that way in terms of replenishment, right? Once I know my brand, once I know the product, I might, I think you'll see more consumers turn online. But today, the store associates have such an important role. The bud tenders, or the folks in the store, and the retail environment has such an important role.
Yeah, we've noticed that the sort of the black market consumers that were moving into the legal market, a lot of them were more comfortable buying online because they were used to buying a certain strain name and they could try to find that online. But with new consumers, they don't even know what strains to look for. They're not familiar with any of these brands, names, product types. They don't know what they're looking for at all. So while the consumers moving from the black market are much more comfortable buying online, these new consumers are absolutely saying the number one place we want to start this journey is in store.
And I guess, so broadly we got two groups of people, those who are already participating in the legal market and then those who are not participating. And it seems like your study said for those who are already participating that they've kind of a little bit got to start all over again a bit in terms of edibles, right? They've got to understand at least the legal retail element of edibles. What did you learn from the study about their thinking about brands and education?
The legal market is going to be very different than what they experienced in the black market. And that is going to be a pretty big shift for anyone that's used to consuming edibles. One of the things that they mentioned is that they're afraid of choosing edibles because of a bad experience that they had in the past. So a new consumer isn't going to walk in.
Not an unfamiliar thing, right? I've talked to many people you consumed marijuana many years ago and say, I had a terrible experience. And I always say, well, you didn't know what you were buying.
Absolutely.
In many ways. And they're still a bit afraid of that in terms of edibles?
Absolutely. I mean, the onset time is very different for a product that you consume versus something that you smoke. And it's just not something that they're familiar with beyond the black market. When we look at the legal market, the way that it's being regulated, the amount of THC that you're allowed to have in any one product is quite limited.
10 milligrams, right, I believe?
That's correct, 10 milligrams. And so if you want to get that long high that people were experiencing in the black market, they're going to have to purchase quite a few gummies.
Interesting. And so, but on the flip side, it feels like, again, reading through the report, that those who are not in the market, and you said this a little earlier, are looking forward to edibles as their entry point to the marketplace, right?
Absolutely. It does have a lot to do with the stigma around smoking. They're looking forward to consuming cannabis without having to smoke it. They don't have those preconceptions about cannabis doing something to them that they're not ready for.
Sure.
Part of this is education. I mean, you can imagine a lot of people walking into these stores with expectations of having a good time, eating an edible, but not knowing what the onset time is, not knowing how much THC they should be looking for, not knowing what the difference is between different types of products. So there's definitely a huge opportunity for education so that people do come back and buy a product again because they know what to expect.
So that's a good segue to kind of the roundabout question, which is what are the key lessons in the report for retailers? As retailers look through this study, and what should they take away from their perspective from what you learned here?
Yeah, one of the things I've already brought up a little bit is around the bud tenders, around those retail store associates. So providing the proper training to them to ensure that they can provide or distill that knowledge back to the consumer is really, really important. If they provide the wrong recommendation, that means that consumer may not come back to your store again. If they provide the wrong recommendation...
Might not even come back to the category again.
May not even come back to the category again. Beyond that bud tender, there is a lot of great information in the report about store experience by segment. So you can imagine we have lots of different segments of consumers. It's not just one consumer type. Of course. And if you can build an experience around those consumers, you're really going to win. And it really is understanding that there are people who are connoisseurs who have been doing this for a long time, who consume on a daily basis. Then there are people who may only consume once a month, who've never experienced it before.
Really, your advice to retailers, take a look at the report, not unlike what they do on a daily basis. Really, their success, both in the category and growing the category, is going to reside with the people who
Absolutely.
are at the front of the gate, right?
100%.
Perfect. So how can retailers who are listening get a hold of you or get a hold of the report? What's the best way for them to find out more, learn more?
Yeah, the best way to get in touch with us and to download the report for free is from liftcobusiness.com. That's our business website. You can also contact us there directly.
Oh, fantastic. I'll put that in the show notes. Anything else that you wanted to say or add about the report? Anything you've already said about something that surprised you? Anything else stand out that you might want to throw in?
Yeah, I think it's always important to think about your product assortment and your planograms beyond just the POS data. Looking at what consumers are expecting, looking around the intended uses and the intended effects of the product. This isn't a case where a consumer's walking in looking for a different type of milk. It's they're looking for a product for a very specific use case, and it's something that needs to be thought about.
Oh, that's good advice. I like your advice around merchandising and different assortment planning. I mean, those are things all come together and probably mean a whole lot more when it comes to a new product. Well, listen, Sean, thanks for sitting down with the Voice of Retail podcast. It's been great chitting and chatting, and I encourage everybody to check out the report and learn more, and we all look forward to October/December to learn more.
Great. Sounds great.
All right. Thank you. Well, thanks to Sonny and Sean for being my guests this week. Now let's hit the highlights from Retail This Week e-newsletter, biggest retail weekly in Canada, and you can subscribe for that for free on retailcouncil.org. Kind of a companion piece. Pull that together each and every week. So busy week, more towards the end of the week than the beginning of the week in retail news. So let's kick it off. Dollarama released their results on Thursday. Good results, good year-over-year growth, comp store growth, and Neil Rossi here talking from Dollarama in the CTV article. Talking about how innovation could be a cramp in innovation because of the protracted trade war. So less things happening in factories across China, less molds being made overall. So that could impact their business in the fullness of time, so to speak. Great couple of interviews from Recode, e-com conference in New York City. Jason Del Rey does a couple of interviews with, first of all, Walmart e-commerce CEO Mark Laurie. That's a full frank discussion about Mark and his work in and around and what the future is for for Walmart.com. Worth checking out. I'd love to hear your opinion of the interview. It's a little rough, actually. Not a lot of charisma going on between those two. It's kind of half interrogation, half interview. So it's an interesting interview to watch nonetheless. So do check it out. And then Jason also interviews Rent the Runway Jennifer Hyman, as she talks about having to justify her company's right to exist to male investors. So that's an interesting interview. She's such a brilliant retailer and innovator. So be sure and watch those two long form videos. They're each about 40 minutes. It's the full deal. Back to retail news here in Canada, so to speak. Hudson's Bay posts deeper loss with streamlining efforts. So year over year, not so great, but part of that is cleaning up some mistakes that they think they've made along the way from merchandising. So cleaned up 300 unproductive brands and introducing roughly 100 new ones, such as Anthropologie, Home, LL Bean, and some Scandinavian fashion brands. That from the Globe and Mail. Other things that are going on, Roots released their results, not spectacular results, down year over year and missing expectations, and now expecting to miss expectations for the year. So lots going on at Roots. We know, we've talked here before, that they're doing all the right things, great stores, opened up in the U.S., that takes time to kind of to bake in. So doing all the right things, and certainly got all the smart people. I know Ann Hodkin working hard on their information and tech systems. So James Connell working, doing amazing work online. So I'm sure that will turn around for the Roots with the talent they have behind it. So best of luck to them. Giant Tiger, our friends in Ottawa, Paul Wood, President and CEO, announces a new loyalty program for Giant Tiger. So that's a great deal. Deep aims at deepening the understanding of the customers and engagement. Those are the two right things to be focused on in terms of a loyalty program. And Giant Tiger just having a great run, a couple of hundred stores now, and we'll look for great things from Paul as he takes the wheel from the great Thomas Haig, who I work with at Zellers and Hudson's Bay Company, who's retired from that running that business, and we'll see where Paul takes that business in the months and years to come. UK toy retailer Hamleys to enter Canada with stores. This is from Retail Insider. They have 167 stores in 18 countries, and they also offer a master franchise in India, where they've got 88 stores in 29 cities. So now they're coming to Canada. So another toy retailer, a fairly crowded, very competitive market. So another toy retailer at some point coming to Canada. I guess they see the gap with... I don't know if it's a gap, really, because Toys R Us is still a thriving business, and you've got Mastermind. So we'll see how that wedges in the fullness of time. What else? So great news for the Brick. They're taking over the Sears space in the West Edmonton Mall, and this article from the Globe and Mail highlights how viable signals confidence in bricks and mortar stores. I think listeners here would know I've always had lots of confidence in brick and mortar stores as part of an overall retail strategy, just how big, how many, and all those very strategic decisions to be made. But anyway, great congratulations to the Brick for taking that space, probably a better space for them, and a good sign of some health in Edmonton and in Alberta, which hasn't had a good couple of years based on their economy from a retail perspective anyway. What else? Neighborhood Goods snags $11 million in front of a new concept department store. This from CNBC. This is obviously, we're moving now into chatting about the U.S. We'll see how this works out. I mean, is this just a better buggy whip, really? Department stores recreating a department store category. Is it recreating a category that is its relevance is a bit challenged? Others would say that there's still life in the department store concept, and it all is up to innovation. So some innovation here. So we wish them the best of luck. That from CNBC. Article here from Retail Wire. And it's interesting because Amazon, Home Depot, and other are taking space in this 50-acre, 3-level warehouse. Now, I'm not talking about 3 levels of racking. This is 3 levels where you can drive transportation trucks up to 3 levels. This has been tried before. This is not exactly a new concept, actually. And as you watch the kind of animated video of how these work, my mind goes to, as they're moving pallets in and out to that 3rd floor, how efficient is it? I guess this is a play on, well, we just can't find enough space, so let's start going up then out in terms of in terms of logistical and warehouse space. So we'll see how that plays out. GameStop announcing that they're closing 200 stores. And that's about 2 months after I think I reported GameStop announces an ambitious plans to breathe new life into its store. They're going to close a bunch of stores. So that's more store closures coming, according to Engadget. So maybe that's not going exactly as planned. We'll wish for the best for our friends at GameStop. L Brands promises an evolution ahead for the Victoria's Secret brand. By its own admission, this from CNBC, stayed tied to its sexy image at Victoria's Secrets for a little too long, or far too long, and less about inclusive opportunities. So we'll see lots of competitors taking share from Victoria's Secret, and we'll see if the concept and strategy can match the marketing. So we know they've got marketing power, but let's see how their assortment plays out and then translates itself into the whatever new marketing strategy it is. So I guess they should be starting with the vision and about what that means in their brand, and then they've got no doubt some great power and great physical real estate across North America. Amazon is now accepting returns in some of its Go stores, Amazon Go. And I'll be in New York City actually next week, so I'm looking forward to my first visit to a Go store, certainly first visit to the New York City Go store. And as well next week, it's a big week in New York, the Apple store that's been under renovation, it seems like forever, on Fifth Avenue, has a grand opening next Friday. So I'm going to go and stop in there, and I'm in New York City for the Great Guelph Conference, where you've got Global E-Commerce Leaders Forum talking about e-commerce around the world. I'll be doing a podcast from there, interviewing lots of interesting people. So look forward to that next week, special edition next week from New York City. Amazon is now, I'm just talking about that, how they're accepting returns. So that means, okay, they got 19 bookstores, they got 4, they got their Amazon 4-star stores, 3 now at last count. Now they got Kohl's, 1,150 stores. So we'll see how this strategy, that from Business Insider, we'll see how that plays out. Independent retail is a good week in independent retailers. Indie bookstores are experiencing an increase in sales. That's great to hear. That 65%, according to this from Good Readers, 65% of all stores reported that new books are seeing an uptick. I'm going to have a special interview with an indie bookstore retailer coming up in next couple of weeks, as well as we'll be talking to the folks in BookNet about some studies that they did. So we'll help unpack or open the cover, crack the spine, whatever, on some indie bookstore information. Great retailers. We wish them all the best and things turning in the right direction. A little focus on loss prevention, and this is easier seen than explained, but I put in kind of a bit of a Ben Affleck lookalike, wanted after Milton LCBO theft. Got him on camera. It does look a lot like a Ben Affleck who's maybe a little less Superman-y, or Batman, sorry, I should say, but does kind of resemble him. And anyway, they got this fellow doing some theft at an LCBO. So I thought I'd put that in. We've got to focus on loss prevention, as you heard Sonny and I chatting about it, and Retail Secure coming up. And for those who are listening in real time, so to speak, that is on September 24th. Other stories from digital marketing, and this is really interesting here. Amazon's new one-day shipping, this from GeekWire, will increase sales by up to $24 billion, driving stock to 2,600. That obviously is a forecast. Someone who's an analyst at RBC did that work in the U.S. So, that's interesting, because they certainly are paying for it now, and you can see that reflected in their weaker or higher costs. Will this all pan out? What else we've got? McDonald's buys a startup that adds automated drive-through ordering. So you actually, instead of talking to someone through a headset, you're talking to a machine that preps your order. Early days voice recognition. Actually, if you haven't had the opportunity, be sure and listen to the interview with Mark Laurie. He talks about how voice commerce is years away because AI needs to get smarter, because you only have a certain number of responses that you're going to listen to. It's not 10 like a page of Google results. It's 1 or 2, and you'll get pretty frustrated. I know I do when I ask for something from either Google or Alexa and the results aren't great. It doesn't lead to better things. So anyway, what else we got? That from Ad Age. Amazon has 30,000 open jobs. That's from the New York Times. So that's not, seasonal people in their warehouses. They are trying to fill 30,000 jobs and these are full-time FTs in and around their business. So they're tech-oriented, a lot of work in their advertising business, AWS. So, just a big business, right? So, if you want to go work for Amazon, looks like, particularly in the States, but also here in Canada, they got offices. That's a definite opportunity. Well, that's a wrap on this edition of The Voice of Retail. If you like this podcast, you can subscribe on Apple, iTunes, or your favorite podcast platform. Please rate and review, and be sure to recommend to a friend or colleague in the retail industry. I'm Michael LeBlanc, founder and president of ME LeBlanc Company, Inc., and you can learn more about me on www.meleblanc.co or, of course, on LinkedIn. Until next time, have a great week.